The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of AIHA. AIHA does not endorse any guest or the entity that they represent. On this episode of Healthier Workplaces, Lessons in Leadership with our guest Cailyn Crawford, recorded live at AIHA Connect 2024 in Columbus, Ohio. Coming up next.
Dr. Jack Driscoll here, founder of HNU Systems and PID Analyzers, and I'm happy to be with you today on Healthier Workplaces. I've dedicated my career to designing real-time gas detectors for worker health and safety. We've introduced a new line of smart gas detectors. You can build your own single component smart analyzers. You can add more sensors to these yards at any time, either basic, low-cost, accurate, and sensitive PID or a fully loaded PID. Check it out on hnu.com.
So we're back live from AIHA Connect 2024 in Columbus, Ohio. I'm Bob Krell, co-founder and publisher of Healthy Indoors Media and your host for the Healthier Workplaces show. Again, we're doing more episodes here live from the Expo Hall floor. And with me, I have Cailyn Crawford, and we're going to be discussing lessons in leadership for students and ECPs. So this is really interesting. Welcome, Cailyn.
Thank
How
you.
are you?
Thanks. I'm doing great.
So I guess I would have you start by just give us a little bit of a background on yourself and your OEHS history.
Sure, yeah. So I think, like a lot of people, my introduction to industrial hygiene and occupational and environmental health and safety was the COVID pandemic. And I had gone through my undergrad. My undergrad career was very lengthy. It's about 15 years, I think. And I bounced around, and I love school, and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to focus on, what I wanted to do. And I ended up with an undergraduate degree in biology and took a couple years off before choosing grad school, and worked as a lab manager at a community college. And I was doing that job when COVID hit, and ended up being part of our department's COVID response and return to work planning, and realized I really enjoyed the advocacy role of advocating for the health of the students and the health of my coworkers. And that was my introduction to occupational safety. And it was actually my supervisor at the time who pulled me aside and said, "So when are you going to grad school?" And then it clicked, and I was like, I think this is what I should do for school. And I'm so glad that I did.
Well, that's fascinating, too, because that's like a total departure from where you were headed, right?
Yeah.
And really the pandemic is kind of the catalyst for that.
Yeah, yep.
Wow, that's wild. So the Lessons in Leadership, is a great initiative. It really is for students and early career professionals. So can you share some inspiration behind creating this space, and some of the objectives, that you're looking to achieve with it?
Yeah. I think the focus of this space is to provide a separate area for students. Coming into this conference, it can be really overwhelming, especially if this is your first time. There's so many opportunities. There's all these great exhibitors who want to tell you about what they do and their products and what they're offering. There's these great sessions that it can be easy to go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I think providing a space that's specifically for students and early career professionals coming in, to give them their own space and their own way to network amongst each other, meet people who are going through the same thing or similar experiences, who are also overwhelmed. And especially the Lessons in Leadership series gives them a chance to get advice that's directed at them and made for them, and kind of tailor-made, and give them their own space.
Excellent. So what do you think makes this series impactful for attendees?
Yeah, I think I'm a big community building person, and I think giving young professionals and students a community here. I talked about giving them their own space, but giving them the opportunity to network with one another, and then also learn from learn from professionals who have been in the field. You can't replicate experience, and I think asking these people who have been in the field for so long and have had so many different experiences. Everybody in this field has had a different experience, and being able to hear their advice and what they have to offer is a really powerful space to provide.
So what are some of the key leadership lessons that people glean from this?
Yeah, I think building off Dr. Sammy Ramsey's keynote speech the first morning, really figuring out how to silence that imposter syndrome. I think that's something that's really big in our field because industrial hygiene and occupational health and safety is such a broad field. Anytime someone comes in, they don't feel like what they're bringing is enough, and they don't feel like there's a place, because everybody they talk to has different expertise and different experience. And so I think that was one of the big kind of themes that we've seen across all the speakers, is knowing how to silence that inner critic or that imposter syndrome. And then another theme that's come up is being aware that prioritizing taking care of your mental and physical health, and that your mental and physical health, sacrificing that for academia is never an acceptable or a productive way forward. A couple other things, credentialing, obtaining and maintaining credentials. That was one that I hadn't thought about that Bob Skoglund talked about, and how that can, it validates your competency. You get a chance to contribute to the advancement of the field. It builds your reputation and helps you with potential networking opportunities. And then another thing, there was another theme that I noticed was team building and advice for team building. So there was advice on, being vulnerable and asking good questions, and you don't need to learn it. You don't need to know everything. There's always room to grow in the field, and
that's hard for people sometimes to reconcile that, right? Because I think the combination of the imposter syndrome, where you just feel like I don't belong here, and then I don't know enough. I'm not competent enough. I mean, actually, I believe that people that question their knowledge base are the smart people. Mm-hmm. Anybody that believes they know everything, obviously,
not necessarily the people you want on your team.
might not really know everything.
Yeah. There was conversations about how to navigate team dynamics and make sure that you have the stakeholders at the table, and that you're involving them in the decision making, and that's how productive health and safety professional achieve what they set out to do.
Yeah, I mean, and building a team, I think, is it's challenging, right? Because getting that mix, where people can actually all lean on each other and get the most out of each other. It's right. It's hard. I mean, it's not just the talent and the skill, right? It's the personality dynamic, right? It's a challenge to get those people together.
Yeah. There was, respect and vulnerability when you're working with other people was a theme that came up, in the context of respect and vulnerability, but with boundaries. So you're an early career professional, but it doesn't mean you don't have something to bring to the table. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because whatever experience you have is beneficial to the position that you're in.
Yeah, no, I totally concur with that. How does Nexus help play into this? Having that whole segment and series here, specifically.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we saw throughout the conference was that each day, these speakers who were there for their 15-minute discussion about what the tips that they have stayed and offered that continuing support to the audience. And I know that when I did my segment, part of my offering was saying, if you are here and you don't see yourself in the field, come and talk to me afterwards, and we'll clarify what strengths you bring to the field and how that can contribute to your professional goals. And I had several students come up to me afterwards and talk about that. And I've noticed that the other speakers have done the same.
Yeah, and that's great because having that whole specific area, targeting that, creating those opportunities for the networking and getting that information, I think is fabulous.
And the personal networking aspect, because there are how many professionals here, and they're, I mean, I imagine they're here. It's AIHA Connect, so I imagine they're here to network. And I've never talked to somebody who wasn't willing to talk about their experience in industrial hygiene and wasn't willing to offer that mentorship. But I think it can be really overwhelming with so many people here and so many. It's really the path forward is not always clear. But when you have a smaller group and you have somebody who is there specifically to provide that guidance, it can be a lot easier to go and approach them when there's 20 people in the room instead of thousands.
Absolutely. So what are some of the that you feel the common challenges that early career professionals face, and what are some ways to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I think one that I faced and that I've heard from a lot of other students who've attended these sessions was when I came into graduate school, and I was I love learning, and I was so excited to be back in school, and I was just the excitement of learning, of having ahead of me, of learning the strategies and the tools for, advocating for workplace safety as a human right. And then my first industrial hygiene classes were advanced topics in industrial hygiene and biostatistics. And I was sitting there, I was learning spreadsheets, I was learning coding, I was learning log normal distributions, and I had this moment of, if this is what industrial hygiene is, I think I don't belong here.
What did I do to myself?
I picked the wrong field. And I came into industrial hygiene with no experience. So I had the lab experience, but I didn't have specific industrial hygiene experience. And it took me a while to identify it, but I was having such a hard time applying the concepts I was learning. And I didn't have any context for them. And that fed that imposter syndrome, and just that, like, maybe I read this field a little bit wrong, but I'm still in my first semester, so there's still time to pivot. And I went to a seminar for a different graduate program, and I walked into this presentation, and right on the screen was a quote that said, "If you can't see where you're going, ask someone who's been there before." And I read that, and I paused, and the quote was by a motivational speaker, J. Lauren Norris, and I read that quote, and I was like, okay, all right.
Well, that's powerful.
Yeah, and it hadn't even. I'm somebody who has been a mentor and been mentored for most of my adult life, and have always appreciated that, and that had never occurred to me that could make that connection for me. And I reached out to the industrial hygienist at the University of Minnesota, and he had been there for 30 years, and we were having this conversation about his background and kind of what a day in the life looked like. And he asked me what my research focus was, the dreaded question when you don't know.
Right.
And I paused, and I came up with the first thing that came to mind as I answered, and he picked up on that hesitation. And what he did next was he asked me about my experiences and my work background, and for every experience that I offered him, he used that as an example of how it would make me a stronger industrial hygienist and a more competent industrial hygienist. And that conversation and that relationship that was built during that conversation was a really pivotal moment for me. And what I was hearing from a lot of the other students during these sessions was that they experienced a very similar thing. They came in, and the program was so technical, and they were having a hard time applying it to real life and applying it to what they were going to be doing in the field. And that mentorship role, or that mentor that they sought out, was really really what kept them here and what kept them in the field. I think one important thing that kept coming up was the challenges that industrial hygienists and occupational health and safety professionals face are huge challenges, and there's a huge benefit. The only way we can solve those problems is to rely on the experience and the input from the people around us, from our team.
Right.
And it's not realistic to think you can solve these problems yourself.
And that's especially critical when things are, going awry and things, with everything's going smooth, it's really easy to be, all friendly and working together, right? The true measure of how good your leadership is and how collaborative your team is under crisis, under stress, when things are going bad, right?
Yeah. And Stacey Barnett mentioned during her talk, humor. Using humor. Gina Siegel mentioned it also for building teams. Humor goes a long way. If this is the first time you've put on a sample pump on somebody and you're really nervous, telling them that you're nervous and making a joke about it.
That's fair.
Is a really good way to really disarm everybody and establish that rapport, and then being willing to admit when you're wrong. And apologize when you're wrong, and that vulnerability that comes with, I don't know everything. I'm doing the best I can, and I know you're doing the best you can, and our team is doing the best we can, and we're gonna solve the problem even if we have to laugh about it in the meantime.
Yeah, it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
I mean, inevitably you're going to fail in any circumstance at times.
Yep.
And so that's okay.
Yeah.
You have to embrace that.
I think another thing that I wanted to touch on was a lesson that Bob Noko mentioned. And that was making sure that as you're entering the field and as you're a student, making sure that you develop a personal mission, making sure that you develop a personal mission statement, and basing that on the values that guide your decision making. Make sure that you know that you have a reference when you're not sure what to do next, and really can help guide your decision making.
Well, and that makes sense too, because the mission statement, is something that it's a rudder, right? And I think we all need that. Like, I find myself, being my ADHD personality, if I can find myself off on a tangent very easily, as you've noticed during the course of our discussion here, it's like. So I think that's critical.
Yeah, and remembering, especially when you're looking at a new job, when you're looking at what do I want to do to advance my career next, making sure that decision or that position that you're considering aligns with your personal values is going to help you power through when you encounter really difficult decisions, and when you are really burned out and you're not sure that you're in the right place. Really being able to fall back on that yes, this does speak to the reason I'm in this field. It does.
Your core motivation, right?
Yeah.
So some really great points you made here, Cailyn. It's fabulous.
Thank you. I've gleaned a lot from the speakers this week.
Well, but that's the key, right? It's like to come these events, as far as like just the straight up educational value is of course important, but I think like the ability to get face-to-face with people and network and speak with other professionals in the industry face-to-face that you can do at an event like this is huge.
Yeah, yep. And just I really appreciated the vulnerability of all the presenters, and most of them offered their personal experience and how they came into the field and mistakes that they made and how that made them stronger. And that was something that I hadn't expected, and I really appreciated from all the presenters.
Excellent. Well, Cailyn, thanks for coming in and spending some time on the show. It was great meeting you, and totally enjoyed our little discussion here about lessons in leadership.
So did I. Thank you for having me.
All righty.
So that's our show for this week. Until next time, I'm Bob Krell. Stay healthy.